The right market timing can turn a 54% investing return into 2,400%. But of course, the market is famously unpredictable and sweet spotting that market timing impossible. But this is the beauty of investing in Pokemon cards. As a modern collectibles market, it's driven by hype, and the hype creates consistent and predictable market movements. What I call the Collectibles Hype Cycle. If you understand Collectibles Hype Cycles, you can time the market, or you can at least learn to use time as a tool to get the most out of your collection. In this video, I'm gonna make sure you understand everything about this powerful framework, and by the end, you're gonna know how to use it to get the most for your collecting dollars. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the TCG Buyers Club. My name's Gray, I buy cardboard, and I make collecting and investing in Pokemon simple. Here's why collectible hype cycles matter. XY Evolutions. And just in case you're not familiar, XY Evolutions was a special set that featured reprinted cards and artwork from the original base set of Pokemon. Released towards the end of 2016 during Pokemon's 20th anniversary, it was a celebration of Pokemon's history. And at first, Pokemon fans loved it. Who didn't want to re-experience the base set cards from their childhood, but in an affordable modern package? At the time, this excitement didn't last. XY Evolutions quickly became a victim of rampant overprinting. It was truly printed to oblivion. And with so much Evolutions to go around and so many products sitting on shelves, the Pokemon Company started to put Evolutions booster packs in every single collection box and Pokemon product you can imagine. And as is always the case when there's wide availability and low prices, the market got bored and lost interest. That is until the start of the pandemic boom in late 2020, nearly 5 long years later. This boom saw a massive influx of new, nostalgic collectors entering the hobby. Collectors who couldn't wait to experience those base set cards again. This was the perfect market for Evolutions to finally succeed. If you were around during this time, you know Evolutions blew up. After years of selling for below $100 a booster box and being considered the absolute trash of the Pokemon market, suddenly those booster boxes exploded to as much as $1,100 at their peak. And during this boom, I was one of those new collectors scrambling to get my hands on boxes of Evolutions. And for me, that meant at about $500 US per box. Now, considering Evolutions booster boxes today still sell for well over $800, I'd say I made out pretty well. But the real time to be buying those boxes was during the months and years prior when they were sitting on shelves for less than $100. Because if you're an investor, the time to be buying collectibles is during these boring times, when the hype is low. And smart collectibles investors know how to identify these times and take action to set themselves up for long-term success. Because, sure, my Evolutions booster boxes are worth more today. Actually, they're worth 60% more than what I paid for them. But I bought them all the way back in 2020 and have held them ever since. As of the time of this recording, that's about 3.7 years. So if I calculate my annualized compounded return on that investment, it works out to about 14.7%, almost a 15% annual return. And that's a great rate of return for any investment. But that is nothing compared to the person who sold me those boxes for $500. Because sure, they sold way before the $1,100 peak for this product. But the prices of those boxes exploded so quickly, there's a very good chance that they bought and held from about that $100 per box threshold. If we assume that they held just as long as I did, say 3.7 years, in order to reap that $500 sale, that 500% return equates to an analyzed compounded return rate of 54%, blowing my returns out of the water. But let's say they sweet spotted that market timing. Because as much as 6 months prior to when I bought those boxes, you could still get them around that $100 price point. I'm telling you, these prices exploded. Let's say they only held for 6 months, earning 500% in that time. That rate of return, compounded annually, equates to a 2,400% rate of return. An absolutely absurd return on any kind of investment. And look, this is completely a hypothetical with respect to that timing. Obviously, timing the market like that right before potentially a once-in-a-lifetime boom for the Pokemon hobby is surely an impossible thing. But it illustrates how important timing your investment purchases is when it comes to collectibles markets. And it demonstrates why understanding the collectibles hype cycles is just so critical to taking advantage of it. See, these kinds of market movements are because the Pokemon market runs on hype. And hype is self-reinforcing. When hype is growing, it attracts even more hype to it. Think about it. When we get into those market runs where there's new high prices being paid for collectibles week after week after week, the news of those successive all-time highs draws even more attention from outside the hobby to it. The hype compounds and increases exponentially. But similarly, when hype is shrinking, it starts to drive more hype away in a similar manner. The result in a healthy, growing collectibles market like Pokemon is a consistent market pattern, which is the collectibles hype cycle. This cycle has 4 unique phases. It always starts at a period of stabilization. In this period, hype is low and market values tend to be flat. This market is driven by the existing collector base all transacting amongst themselves. And in particular, there's very little outside public attention on the hobby. The stabilization period is the longest period in the hype cycle, often lasting as long as 15 to 20 years. A stabilization period is followed by a boom. This is a short and intense period of rapid price appreciation across the market. It's that period of compounding hype that draws more outside attention into the hobby, driving prices up and up and up. The boom is often only 6 to 18 months long, but during that time, prices can increase by many times where they were in the previous stabilization. Eventually, the boom is going to come to an end, and that's where we see the correction. Like it or not, the correction is inevitable. Because hype is this self-fulfilling prophecy, it inevitably makes the boom like a bubble. And eventually that bubble is going to burst and prices need to reset back down to a realistic level. That's the correction. The correction is also generally quite short and intense, maybe lasting as short as 3 to 6 months. When the correction ends, the market will settle at its new stabilization level, which over time will become the stabilization point that starts the cycle all over again. In a healthy, growing hobby like Pokemon, we expect the outcome of each of these boom cycles to be more collectors actively participating in the hobby than were before the last boom. And because of that, we expect the new stabilization to be higher than the previous stabilization. And certainly that seems to be the trend we've seen with Pokemon over the last many years. Now that you understand the collectibles hype cycle, we can really start about how you time the market in collectibles. And no, this framework isn't going to make it easy for you to sweet spot the timing every time. As we've mentioned, that is just simply impossible. But it is equipping you with a new tool set you can use to make sure you're making the right decisions at the right time for the current state of the market in the hype cycle. And doing so is going to help you maximize your time and investments in these markets. And look, none of this is financial advice whatsoever. I'm just a basement dweller who's been spending far too much time analyzing these collectibles markets and wants to entertain you by sharing my new delusions on the internet. Please do your own research and don't listen to me. So back to the hype cycles. As I said, the stabilization periods are by far the longest periods in the entire hype cycle, lasting as long as 15 to 20 years. Pokemon seems to be on a 5-year cycle with the 2016 boom and then the pandemic boom, but prior to 2016, you could make an argument that there wasn't a boom in the hobby since the original 1999 boom, which is right in the middle of that 15 to 20 year period that we often see in other collectibles and antiques markets. So we need to keep that in mind. These timelines are no guarantee. And during these long stabilization periods, you're not gonna be hearing about the hobby and outside media sources. I'll bet your family and friends aren't reaching out to you asking you about your collection. No, during these times, it is boring. But we love boring. Because when the average collector gets caught up in the hype and starts buying aggressively during those boom periods, the smart collectibles investor has already built their positions during the boring times when hype was low. Recognizing that the Pokemon market is in a period of stabilization is the first key to timing the market. This is buying evolutions in the years before the pandemic boom when prices exploded. Because in our previous example where the seller who sold me evolutions earned, say, 54% year over year, well, they held that product for years with a 0%, maybe even negative return. They still paid the storage costs, they still paid any insurance, they still found the space for the product. They incurred these costs with nothing to show for it for a long time. But when the market finally boomed, they were able to sell for that 500% return, which, as we saw, was maybe 54% or more year over year. In the end, it would have totally been worth it, even though they missed the market peak by a significant amount. But I know, you're not here for that measly 54% return. I get it. We all want the big 2,400% chicken tendies dinner all night long. And I've already said that nailing that kind of timing is basically impossible. You're just rolling the dice and hoping for good luck. But the Collectibles Hype Cycle does give us a lesson that can help us maximize our chances of getting closer. And it's simply this. The longer your collectibles market has been in a period of stabilization, the more likely the next boom is about to happen soon. And look, I know barely any of you have made it this far, and this is the most important takeaway of this entire video. Because what the Collectibles Hype Cycle teaches us is what a long-term investing perspective in Pokemon actually means. It's looking for underappreciated products in times when market hype is low and committing to holding it for as long as it takes to experience that next boom where you finally cash out. And I know this might sound underwhelming, but let me be clear. This is incredibly powerful because this understanding is the ammunition that allows us to fight back against our human psychology. The natural human instinct that says in these quiet stabilization periods that there's no reason to be buying Pokemon cards at this time. The market is dead or dying and it's never coming back. If you believe in Pokemon and you believe the market is going to boom again in the future, you now know that this is the time to make your plays and build your positions. Once the boom has already happened, it's too late. And look, this is not a new idea. In fact, this entire video was inspired by this book right here, written by Mr. Harry Rinker and released in 1988. In this book, in the 1980s, Mr. Rinker documented the market movement graph, these cyclical market patterns that define collectibles and antiques markets, which was already visible and repeatable all the way back in the 80s. Unfortunately, this book is out of print and actually took me many years and hundreds of dollars to acquire a copy of my own. And this video is one of many where I'm trying to make the information in this book more widely available and accessible to the modern collectibles investor. And so if this video helped you at all, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment below and tell me what you think. I read every single one and I love hearing from all of you. And if you appreciate this kind of Pokemon market analysis, tips, and frameworks, well, subscribe because there's a lot more to come. And of course, thank you so much for tuning in to the TCG Buyers Club. My name's Gray, I buy cardboard, and I'll see you in the next video.